First, let me thank the students who organized this panel and their hard work in bringing attention to this important topic. Since the beginning, there were guidelines that God gave us through religion when it comes to what we consume. And we know that in the Jewish tradition there is a code for kosher, and similarly in Islam there's a similar code for what's called halal or lawful. Lawful means that God approves of it or allows it, and doesn't mean necessarily that you can just eat as much as you can. Those guidelines are coming to be more important today as we discover in science the role they play. But I want to go over first on the meats that we eat, that today sometimes people do not differentiate between the types of meat they eat and how they mix them, how they cook them. But in our faith, we are not allowed to eat any animals that are meat eaters themselves, be it birds or animals in the wild. Also pigs and all their byproducts, pork, lard, is all prohibited for us because it's not compatible with our digestive system, and it may cause and has caused historically many outbreaks of flu. Recently we had the pig flu, but it was the cause for the flu during World War I that took millions of lives. All sea creatures are allowed, all types of fish, and that includes shellfish, lobsters, and shrimp, and what have you. And all animals or birds must follow a strict guidelines in terms of before we can consume them. They have to be healthy, and that's where this discussion about GMOs and what we feed our animals, our birds, before we consume them. Even the fish today in fish farms, we're not allowed from a religious point of view to give animals certain types of feeds. For example, some waste and some animal byproducts are mixed, crushed with the seeds and with the hay and fed to cows and sheep and chickens today to provide more hormones and to give them what Pastor Coffin talked about, to reach maturity in a half time. But if the cow was eating in its feed meat products, which is not compatible with its system, we cannot eat that cow. It becomes itself prohibited for us. We must invoke the name of God when we slaughter the animal, and when we slaughter the animal, we have to make sure the animal was healthy, not sick, as the example he gave with the cow that was infected. That's why inspections are very important, and it's not just the inspection, but it's that self-policing. As a farmer, if I know that my animal has any kind of disease, I cannot slaughter it and eat it or sell it to somebody else. There's religious prohibition. So as a child, like my colleague, I grew up on a farm, and I took care of the sheep and goats that my grandmother had, and chickens, and I worked in the fields, also growing wheat and lentil and other seeds. And I learned firsthand the importance of this relationship with the land and with the animals that we are entrusted with. And I got a taste for what is truly organic, not in this country, but overseas, where we never use pesticides or any kind of fertilizers. Our chickens and I would take after school every day in elementary school all my sheep and goats and go out in the fields, and they graze while I'm doing my homework. And, to taste that milk when they come back home and they're full, and I would milk them, and nothing compares to a glass of delicious milk that's really organic. Here, the milk has really that weird taste or no taste compared. The eggs that I used to, move the chicken as a kid and take the egg while it's still warm, and with olive oil, make my own eggs, fry eggs, and the taste is amazingly different. So today, I feel sorry for my kids who hear this from me just as a story, but I get my eggs from Publix, and they taste it and all the fruits we eat is like rubber or like cardboard. It has no real taste. The apples, the tomatoes, the cucumbers. And I took my kids overseas and into the fields, and we picked up tomatoes and cucumbers, and I handed it to them, and they were eating it like it's fruit, and they were enjoying it. So this is something that we didn't talk about, but it's really important to understand what we are missing when we go with GMOs. This process was put in place, thousands of years ago, or since the beginning by God, in order to regulate, to give us a sense of humility. We did not create these animals and these plants, and there is a creator, a maker, a designer who is giving us the manual on how to use them and how to handle them in order for these things that God created for us to be beneficial to us. Otherwise, we are consuming harmful things that we end up, with diseases and cancers that we never had before. We have in our faith guidelines on foods and drinks that all foods that are known to be healthy and beneficial to human beings are allowed. Once any type of food is discovered to cause harm, it becomes prohibited. So this debate rages on now as we start manipulating seeds and manipulating how animals are growing, that borders on religious, issues. All drinks that contain alcohol are also prohibited, simply because they're harmful to our bodies, to our mind, to be able to think clearly and make rational decisions. All drugs are prohibited. And even though there's this exception for medicines, but medicines are still drugs. So you have to use the minimum possible and not become, as in our culture today, that we have a pill for everything. Your body has a natural immunity and natural ability to recover if you eat healthy, if you sleep well, if you take time off and rest, if you don't stress much, if you pray and meditate, your body can recover. But we want instant recovery by popping a pill, not knowing what, we're willingly injecting all these poisons into our system that cause other issues that we don't know. Maybe years later that we discover that they were, and we hear all about recalls by pharmaceutical companies for harmful medicines that the FDA has approved before. All types of smoking is prohibited, all types of tobacco, even if we're not injecting it or consuming it, if it's chewing, it's. We also have restrictions on how much to eat. You should not, the Prophet said, eat 1/3 of your fill. and 1/3 is for water, and 1/3 to be able to breathe, to chew it. Today we have obesity problem that we see that they put sugar in a lot of things, and they make us want to continue to eat and eat and eat and eat like throughout the day. And then we have to deal with the diabetes and all the problems that we're seeing today because we're not moving as much. We're not physically active as people before us used to, before cars. So we have a problem there. Now, speaking about the GMOs, my colleague here has covered that GMOs are living organisms whose genetic material has been artificially manipulated in a laboratory through genetic engineering. This relative new science creates unstable combinations of plant, animal, bacteria, and viral genes that do not occur in nature or through traditional crossbreeding methods. It's important to understand that when we mess with something that we don't know much about, we cannot take it out and test it on billions of people. But that's exactly what he was talking about. These companies that are really testing in real people out there. So we see that there are all the promises, as he said, there was a pipe dream that this is going to improve things and feed the world, but they haven't materialized. Instead, they have caused a lot of issues and problems for our life today. Are they safe? As he stated, at least 30 countries ban them, 60 countries have strict regulations around them. But here in the US, they seem to have a strong lobby that our elected officials are not able to address this issue. So I'm not going to go deeper into the GMOs because it's their specialty here. But I want to look at it from an Islamic point of view. When you manipulate something that's already out there, that God created, their question comes up, can you or should you or are you allowed to? There's a general prohibition in Islam to change what God created. You have the right to use it, multiply it, but when you go to its genetic code and start manipulating it, you don't know what you're doing and what problems you're causing. So to us, so many scholars in Islam, now the majority are leaning against GMOs because they're falling under this manipulation of creation and not simply science, how to improve production and protection of these foods, but rather how to change the very nature of these foods that we are consuming. So there are many scholars who outright forbid it, even though Islam is not against science. And if we can prove that they are safe, they are not really changing the nature, we are fine with it. But that should be done in a laboratory, not out in the world on real human beings. We are against it for other reasons, such as the environmental damage that it's causing. You know, when they're doing this and then they say it's fine for farmers to use now all these other insecticides and other chemicals, that's causing more damage to the world, to nature. Violation of farmers' rights. You know, farmers are being controlled, as we heard from my colleague, that if you are not following the strict fine print of their contracts, they put you out of business, and they have done so to many American farmers. And so they're not really after helping the farmers, but deepening their own pockets. And also violation of consumer rights. That's all of us. We're not being told, no labeling, proper labeling on these foods. So we don't know really what we are eating. It looks like, you know, I heard from some scientists that there were over 50,000 types of seeds of corn in the, you know, the Southwest. And now we are depending on one or two kinds only. And the others have been eliminated, okay? But nature had its own way, its own selective process to make seeds that fit different climates and different parts of the country or the world. And that's being eliminated so that one company can patent their GMO and then control the market for good. So we have also guidelines on keeping the body healthy. So we have a religious responsibility to know what we are eating. And for example, there are a lot of Muslims who would not eat the meat from the market. They will not eat the meat that's labeled halal from halal meat stores, because they go and ask, how are you feeding those chickens or this beef? And which farms did you bring them from? We actually have Muslim companies that go and rent out or buy huge tracts of land in Australia and New Zealand, and where they can grow animals the traditional way, where they graze on real grass, not sitting in a very tight space and be fed this, because nobody's going to buy their products. So there is also a huge market, and it's all based on religion. Religion plays a very powerful role to regulate this behavior for us. So anything we inhale or inject to our body has to be fitting this, and staying physically healthy through exercise. Our prayers are really 5 daily exercises where we move up and down, up and down, up and down, and keeps us in shape. Last but not least is fasting. Eating is not always the solution. Sometimes not eating is part of the solution, and that's where in all the Abrahamic traditions there is fasting. And in Islam we have the month of Ramadan where we fast from food and drink from dawn to sunset. We eat before a small meal before we start the fast, and we eat a small meal when we break the fast at sunset time. But that trains us to have control over our eating habits and choice of what we eat, as well as gives us the time to cleanse our system from the toxic chemicals that we ingest through the food that we have. And in addition to the obligatory fast for all Muslims, there's optional fasting, like recommended 3 days a month or Mondays and Thursdays. That's the schedule I like. On Mondays and Thursdays, since I was a kid, I fast, and it's very healthy. But no more than every other day, which was called the fast of the Prophet David. He used to fast every other day. So we need to look at what we eat and what we don't eat, and hopefully through bringing awareness, we can, instead of depending on others to determine our health, we can take control back of our health. Thank you.